Hi everyone. A lot of you may be thinking of cornbread as something that is baked in the oven, but in our family, cornbread always came fried. I think I was almost an adult before I realized that most of the time that cornbread was not made this way. So I'm going to show you guys my recipe, which is done a lot by feel, but you're going to start out with about 2 cups of flour and about a teaspoon of salt. And in a lot of cases, you are going to have to adjust the amounts of these things. And you want to add enough water to get that mixture to the consistency of buttermilk, so it's going to be a little bit thicker than milk, but not quite as thick as something like yogurt. So you want this to be a pretty thin consistency, and a lot of times you'll literally see water almost pooling on the top. This whole process is mainly done by feel, and so you kind of adjust things as you go, and then also you might have to add water later on in the process as that cornmeal absorbs the water that's already there, because keeping this thin is what's going to help us with getting those crispy edges. You also want to keep your whisk or a spoon or something in the mixture, and then you're going to take it over to the stove, and you're going to have to be very careful about watching this, and it's pretty much a hands-on process the entire time. When my Mima would make it, she would make it with a pan in the oven and put a whole bunch of shortening in the pan and then put little dollops in the pan and just bake it. But we're going to be frying it this time because she originally did fry it in a pan, and she just did that as she got older. So unless you are dealing with a very, very seasoned like cast iron pan that you've been using forever, you do want to spray the pan first because it's going to give us a little insurance to keep things from sticking. And then you're going to fill that pan with about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of oil, and you can kind of see about how high it is, and then you're going to heat that up on medium high. We don't want to turn it all the way up to high because medium high is going to be about what you need. Also, now is a great time to turn your ventilation fan on, and we'll talk about the reasons why a little later in the video, but go ahead and turn that ventilation fan on. Once it seems like it's warm, you're going to put a couple of drops of water into the pan, and if it doesn't do anything, then your fat is not hot enough. So then what you're going to have to do is wait until that kind of sizzles and pops a little bit, and as you can see, it's starting to get there, and it might pop you at this stage, so be very, very careful because that oil, if you put too much water in there, can pop up and burn you. So now we are about ready to start adding in our cornmeal mixture, and you want to always stir it right before it goes in, and you're going to add about 1/4 of a ladle, if it's a standard size ladle, to the pan for each piece, and it does spread quite a bit, so give yourself some time between each one. And as you can see, I'm kind of adjusting the consistency right there, and just to get those edges a little bit lacier and get them a little bit crispier. So once they begin to fry, just look at those edges, and if they're not as lacy as you want, add a little bit more water, and it will get the little holes and bubbles on the side as soon as you put it in there, so you'll know pretty quickly. So as you can tell, I adjusted the amount of batter that's there is the same for all 3 of those, but because it's a little bit thinner, it's going to spread out more, and that's going to give you that crispiness on the sides. You may want to slide your spatula under the pieces right at the beginning to make sure that they're broken loose from the bottom, because it does have a tendency to stick. Anything that's starchy is going to stick pretty well, and that's also the reason why we put that spray in the bottom before we begin. So you're going to carefully flip these over, and there's a good chance that you're going to have to learn this and figure things out, because chances are you will mess a couple up. As you can see, I folded one of them. But you're going to just continue to cook that until the desired browning is reached, and the way you know they're ready to flip is you will see the edges kind of dry out and get a little bit brown. And the first batch, you're going to be figuring out the temperature and stuff, so you might have to flip more than once to get there. And that's generally the way it works with things like pancakes or things that you are flipping. You're kind of learning the process each time, and don't count on it being the same every time. So once you get them brown enough, you're going to remove them from the pan. I found this time it took about 3 minutes per round. So it took about 3 minutes from the time that they hit the oil until the time that they came out. And as you can see, that they are able to slide almost as soon as they go in there, and that's partially because of that insurance policy we put in with the spraying. The first side is going to take a little bit longer than the second side, so keep that in mind. And once you get the first round done, you're going to realize, okay, I need to wait a little longer on the first flip, and then you just kind of adjust it. You may need to add water throughout this process if the edges are not getting lacy as you continue, because the cornmeal just soaks up the water pretty easily. So this is a process you just kind of adjust as you go. You may also need to add oil as you go, depending on how much it's absorbing. You would prefer to not need to add oil, because that means that cornbread is absorbing all of that. So if you have your temperature on medium-high and it's cooking pretty quickly, then you shouldn't need to add a ton more oil. Also, as I mentioned before, make sure your ventilation fan is on. If it is a time of year where you can have windows or doors, storm doors open to kind of let air come through, that's a good thing. And close the doors to the rest of your house, like your bedrooms and bathrooms and things like that, because frying ends up smelling up the entire house, regardless of what you're frying. And it can also set smoke alarms off, so don't be surprised if that happens. But a good way to prevent that is to make sure you got that vent fan on and open windows if you can, just to make sure that all of that is set. So you end up with a whole lot of cornbread for not a whole lot of commitment in this. And this is one of my favorite family recipes. We make this at New Year's whenever we do collards and ham. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for learning about one of my family traditions. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because I'm hoping to go more into making some more family recipes and more traditional things as we go along.